whatever you consider as an asset is something that brings you money. Whatever's a liability is something you pay out that you don't make money from. So most people look at their home and they think it's an asset. But unless you're constantly pulling money out of it and making money with that money you're pulling out, it's a liability.
Welcome. This is the DC Talks podcast. I'm your co-host, Agent 00, Owen Osende.
There it is.
With the main man, David Chinelli.
What's up, brother?
What's up, my guy? How you doing?
Doing well, buddy. How about you?
I am doing fantastic.
Yeah.
Today what we're going to talk about is money. We haven't chatted about money for, I think, the first 10 episodes. We kind of briefly touched upon it, but we want to get deeper into it today. And with things rising, costs of living, cost of doing business, everything has a cost to it now. And with that happening, there comes with a lot of negligence when it comes to people understanding how their personal finances work, how to manage it better, and etc. So we're going to get deep into that today. We're going to get my guy DC's view on that and his takes on it. But my first question to you, DC, is what are some of the financial traps that you're currently seeing people getting themselves into?
Well, in my business too, there's a lot of issues with real estate. Yeah. The fallacy, and I think when Jason Pereira was here, we talked about the time people don't pull out a calculator to figure out how much their expenses are, how much things are worth. So they just always assume that real estate's always going to go up. Over time, you hold on to property. Yes, it goes up. That's one. But I think the pitfall was understanding in the beginning, if you're buying a pre-construction property, not factoring what the interest rates are, if they're going to go up, that's a lot of big one. People bought houses 4 or 5 years ago when the interest rates were 2%.
Yeah.
Now they're going up to 6-7%. The cash flow's there. They're like, how do I get out of this? It's that's a financial pitfall, right? One thing we talked about before was another investment. And I think with any of those cryptocurrencies or even buying gold or something like that, I find that even in stocks, just financial illiteracy is causing people to lose money. And it's not the fact that none of those, I'm not saying any of those avenues you can make money in them. You 100% can, but it's knowing how to make money in them. But what are your options while purchasing things? And I think that's the biggest pitfall. They see their neighbor or their sister well, he made money in crypto, and they just go and they buy a whole bunch of crypto, not doing the research, lose money. Or I remember the wheat stock was a big one. Remember that? Everyone was like, oh, I could jump on a wheat stock. So they went crazy. And then everyone had wheat and all of a sudden they dropped. They lost money too. It's you can't just throw money at something just because everybody else has. And there's a lot of those that you can pinpoint.
Dude, man, there's so many. The crypto craze when it happened, even during the pandemic, people are just dashing their money at whatever Elon Musk says is hot, right? When the wheat stocks came out, I remember my mom was all about it. I kind of got into it. I was like, man, what are the fundamentals behind this business, right? And
did you buy any?
I did.
Did you make any money?
I know I lost money.
See?
Yeah. So I'll admit that. I took a burn on that, but it comes just from believing in the hype into something, which is what costed me. And that was actually a big turning point for myself, DC. That was I think at that age, I was around 22. So that around 2017-ish, around, 2016-ish, around that time. Got into it, was really educating myself on stocks and everything and really understanding how to really buy into a stock. So typically you don't buy into a stock, you're buying into a business. So those are one of the major core principles that I learned is when you're investing, you don't invest into, the stock ticker, it's looking plus 40% time. No, you don't know the business. Do you understand what they do? Do you understand how to read their EBITDA? Do you understand how they got to that? What's their future projections? Who's the management? All these certain things.
Well, even still, you might have a quarter in which you've made money, but if it's the stock market is based on projections, and then if you didn't do as well as you thought, your stock dropped. But I made money. It doesn't matter. It's it's all perception. So let me ask you a question. Where did you learn about all the stuff?
It came out of self-learning. Honestly, it came out of
surprise.
They don't teach this in school, right? So
that was the idea of this podcast. When I was watching, Robert Kiyosaki, and I was and I sent you that clip, and I was like, this is how I learned. I have an MBA, for fuck's sakes. They never taught us how to make money. I have a real estate degree or whatever you call it.
A license. What is
License.
it?
I guess license.
Certificate.
But yeah, because it's tons of courses. They don't teach you how to make money.
Yeah. Why?
You don't learn in school how to make money.
And this is such a core thing for us to really exist, like how to make money, how to
Wait
grow.
a second, you need money to live? But here, we're not going to talk about it. You got to figure that shit on your own.
Yeah,
but you need it to live.
We're going to teach you how to do parabolas.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I'll teach you like the curvature of the moon.
Of the
moon. So, yeah, it does. It literally, like, I can teach you how to create the slope of, like, a whole bunch of calculus and algebra, which you'll never use.
Y equals mx plus b.
Yeah,
so dumb. Like, I mean, those are good things to learn, in my opinion. But I think the focus of what you actually need to know in, okay, how to do your taxes, how to settle a budget, all these certain things that are key essential things that we're doing each and every single day, they completely looked over that. They're like, nope. Like,
and why do you think that is?
Because they want us to be slaves to the system.
There you go.
They want us to be slaves of the system.
Well, let's be honest. If you think outside the box, if you think on your own as an entrepreneur, you'll do terrible in school because school is not made for you to think. The school is set up, and Ford, I forget whoever set it up. The school system was set up to do research on it too. I forget the name.
Yeah, I think it was Henry Ford.
It was Henry Ford. His idea was to indoctrinate them early because they can get used to shift work.
You know what it is? It was Rockefeller.
Probably, yes.
Rockefeller.
I think you're right. Yes,
John D. Rockefeller.
And that's it. He goes, don't let them basically to do well in school. He'll give you tasks and you check it off the box, whether like as long as you can do it. And that is a typical employee. That's what they want you to do. They don't want you to learn how to make money. They don't want you to learn how to be financially independent. It's scary. Like,
yeah. He was saying that I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers. I think that was the quote he said.
But listen, if you don't think, you don't question, you just follow along, you can get anything you want accomplished if you're at the head of the chain.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can run a country.
And that's the thing, man. Even like right now, like even with, I took out OSAP to go to school, right? It's because that is what I was told to do. Because my parents, they couldn't really afford to like pay full tuition for me to go to university. It's just like, yeah, I have to work a little bit in the summers, but my mom helped me out a little. But I think about 40% of it was OSAP over time. But then you really realize that, man, there's other alternatives of education. So they teach you, hey, to go to college, to go to school, you're going to be stuck to us. You're going to be paying this interest over time. And then before you know it, as soon as you touch 18, you're already in debt.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like how
explain that to me. How can you walk into a bank and say, I have no education, no past experience. I want to go and I want to get an education. I want you to give me $120,000 without any background on it. I may never use this again. Like, the bank's like, sure. But if I want to use that $120,000 to buy a rental property, they're like, whoa, wait a second.
Hold on.
You want to make money with my money?
Yeah.
Like, no. I want to, like, so the whole system is a little bit messed up in that kind of sense. Yeah. So I was thinking when I was doing my MBA and I did, so after I did my MBA and I started at Toronto Hydro.
Yep.
And I got my first rental property because I saw about the taxes, how much it was hammered. And I was reading books. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and how you could, those are great books. You know, Think and Grow Rich is another one. The Habits of a Millionaire. I was reading all these books and figuring out like, you know, what to do to earn wealth. And I was thinking to myself, and I'm like, I am learning so much on my subway ride to work than I ever did in the class about making money. I never learned how to make money. I didn't know any of these tax brackets. I didn't know what people did. Like, even though my dad had bought rental properties, he never sat me down and said, this is why I'm doing it, right? We had no idea. I had no idea up until you got your first paycheck as an employee, like a real employee. You're like, wow, like that's a lot of taxes and stuff that's coming off of this. Well, what can I do? And it's funny. So I thought about it. I'm like, I was going to write a book about how to make money. So I was thinking about writing a book. The book was going to be entitled how to, like, things I didn't learn in my MBA, which would have been practical. And the biggest one is like basically making money. It was a working title, but I wanted to talk about how it doesn't matter how many degrees you get. Nobody tells you how to live because you need money to live. But it would have been fantastic with an MBA class, a tax
course,
or even my business undergrad. A tax course would have been great. We took accounting, but like but not accounting like you would think. Like accounting for business would have been fantastic. Well, why would you want to, like, how could you, what is a write-off? All those kinds of things. Like, what do those kind of help you like with, right? A banking class would have been like, using interest rates and figuring out how to use equity and how that builds on a property. A real estate course would have been great, right? Like those are things. I took an entrepreneurship class in my MBA. And what I loved about it was they taught us how to do like a business case. So had like a business plan, I figured out where you're going to make money, kind of thought outside the box in that kind of sense. It's the only class I had that made us think, I'm like, okay, we need to make money. And then what do you want to do with it? You want to sell it later on? I'm like, it was great. So we did have some sort of finance classes, but our finance class is more about, reading stocks and kind of like, seeing about, with mortgages and kind of calculating them, which is fine, but it wasn't practical. Right? Like the way that we see it as a day-to-day. Robert Kiyosaki brought it simple. And I loved his method of, it's like, whatever you consider as an asset is something that brings you money. Whatever's a liability is something you pay out that you don't make money from. So most people look at their home and they think it's an asset. But unless you're constantly pulling money out of it and making money with that money you're pulling out, it's a liability. It's a liability at the end of the day. It can't be an asset, so you tap in the money. And that changed my whole thought. Then you look at cash flow, those kinds of things. Those would have been courses would have been fantastic to learn. And how to build wealth.
Yeah.
Why, when it comes to tax time, like what do you do with money for tax time? Like when you're earning a paycheck, well, should I be investing it? Should I put it in savings? What should I do with it? Like, how do I know I have enough time for the tax time? So those would have been like practical classes we could have used to kind of expand your mind. Like, okay, how do we supplement income? If I make this much amount of money, here's my tax bracket. I didn't know I know this sounds naive, but I didn't even know what a tax bracket was after I did my MBA.
And so this is like 26?
20. I got graduated from my MBA in 2004.
Okay.
So I was 26 years old. Yeah. 26, 25, 26. I didn't know any of this stuff.
Are you serious?
No, I didn't. I just, and I say,
and I'm not saying that like,
no, and I'm saying like, I was a good student.
Exactly.
So I know everything was in the textbooks. I can tell you that. I remember having a class and doing my MBA, and they're talking about these companies and like Procter and Gamble, and they're talking about like GlaxoSmithKline. I had no idea who any of those companies are. I didn't really even know. I didn't know even any of them. Like I was so sheltered in my life with not knowing even what companies were. Like I knew the big ones. I knew what IBM was. I knew what Coke was. But like some of the other small conglomerates, I had no idea.
So what you just like, I know you've said you're a very good student, right? You're very intelligent. So your MO was just like, okay, I'm going to absorb the material. I'm going to really understand it, and I'm going to ace the exams and the assignments. That was just like your main objective.
Well, yeah, kind of. Like my objective was to get good grades, to get a degree. And I had no idea what I was going to do with my degree.
Yeah.
I started my university degree with I was a major in math. Well, actually, I didn't know where to start. So I thought I like math. Let me start math. I didn't want to get into accounting because I didn't want to be an accountant.
Yeah.
And I didn't even really know what an accountant did. But then I realized that I had a light bulb going, well, what do you want to do with a math degree? You don't want to teach. You want to be a teacher. That wasn't my thing. So then I had taken some courses. I'm like, taking a business class. I really took a liking to business. So I switched. So when I was doing my courses, it was more like, okay, absorb the material. And I have a good memory in the sense that I can remember a lot of things too, but obviously some courses you didn't care about. Like I take biology because I have a business of science degree. Either for my school was like either go business, Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor of Science. So my Bachelor of Science, I had to take some science courses, right? So, I took biology, took chemistry, all those kinds of things. So those ones I don't remember. Those ones would just get through. But the business courses, I was actually, they're practical. They talked about like, marketing, all those kinds of things, right? But it wasn't like practical stuff. It was just like textbook stuff that you know about. So I can tell you what they said. And I can tell you what a diamond E is, or like, so which is your strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities, and then environment. That's a diamond E.
Is it the
SWOT? It's SWOT. SWOT analysis with environment is called it. We call it MBA diamond E. So I can explain all that kind of stuff too. I can bring all that practical knowledge, which I still remember. I have the stuff that was practical, I remembered. But the funny thing is that I know to this day, like I can't remember any of my math stuff, but that stuff didn't even help me even in my first job.
Mhm.
So I took all this information and I'm like, I'm going to get to a job. They're like, okay, great. That just basically tells us you can learn.
You can learn.
So this is now how we're going to do it.
And you can follow orders.
Exactly.
And what was that? Was it frustrating to you to realize how hoodwinked you were? Like here you are thinking you're learning and everything.
Pissed.
You're pissed, right?
I was a little pissed.
Was it like 27, 28 around that time?
Yeah, around that. Well, but I realized by then I got my first rental property at 26, I think. So 25, 26. So I started, I bought it in June. I think it was 6 months after I started. So maybe 2005 I bought it. And I was like, then I kind of knew how to, I still didn't know how to buck the system necessarily because it took me until 2009. So 2008, I was able to know how equity worked and all that kind of stuff. And that kind of opened my eyes.
Walk us through that mindset shift from being told to do this your entire life to now thinking there's another way out here that I have full autonomy over my life and no one can tell me what to do. How long did it take for you to fully be that person who thinks with this financial literate mindset, who's all about investing and looking for opportunities to create that wealth and money?
I think it only happened a few years ago, to be honest with you, like to feel comfortable financially. In that kind of sense, because of like, kind of free in that kind of sense. But you never really, I don't know, the Italian me always comes out because it's like you're always worried what happens, right? So it's like you're never worrying. That's part of our culture. Italians, we worry. But it's also like at one point, I think it was a couple of years ago, and I was sitting back and I was like, shit, I think I can do pretty much now. We can make a path, but kids are, I sat back, I thought, okay, my kids have more investment opportunities that we had this week. Like we invested in a critical care, which was an investment in case they get sick, they have money left over them. Then we invested in another property, something else for them. And we're buying them we're buying condos now hopefully for them to move. And I'm like, and they have RESPs. And I'm like, I didn't have any of that shit. I was like, holy cow. And it's like, I'm like, so I thought about that. I'm like, okay, my kids are doing well. Like my wife and I were really in a good position. Like we had a nice house, nice cars and stuff too.
She has her business too.
Her business is doing very well. Like, most of the time she doesn't ask me for money and stuff too. So it's nice. But yeah, so I think at that point it was kind of a light bulb. And I was like, okay. And then I was able to focus on the business. I'm like, so I think around the pandemic and stuff too. I think it was just before the pandemic. I'm like, so when the pandemic hit, we're like, yeah, we're okay. So we didn't need to get CERB or any of that kind of stuff too. We just persevere forward. I think that helped the business because we were confident. We weren't scared about what the world was going to bring. Yeah. And that was a shift.
That was a shift.
Yeah. Did I answer your question?
Oh, absolutely. You did. and with more opportunity, with more business coming your way, like now you have all these properties, you're investing.
Yep.
What's your personal rule for buying something expensive?
What do you consider expensive?
I could be like material stuff, like let's say clothing, watch,
earn it,
cars,
earn it.
But what is that rule that you have? For me to buy this, I need to have this in place.
At the beginning of the year, I have certain goals set. This year I actually didn't do the goal setting for things I wanted because I thought this year with the interest rates, things just went up too much. There wasn't enough money left in the kitty to do that. I want to see what interest rates drop a little bit. But in the years in the past, it's a driving force I have. So one of my coaches always talked about, putting into a wish list, like having a picture book, cut this out and make milestones. And I did do that. But now I have a nice car, I have my watches and all that kind of stuff too. And it's like, but if I make a certain dollar value, I said to this year, and I talked about it off camera, I'll think about buying another watch, but I won't just go out and buy something unless I've earned a certain price point, right? Like I set goals at the beginning of the year and I try to hit those milestones. If I don't buy it, whatever it is. So I have one in mind I kind of would think about getting. It'll change and stuff too. But if I don't hit that milestone that I want at the end of the year, it's not going to happen. I'll push it to next year, right? So I think just to go out and buy luxury goods just for the sake of buying luxury goods is stupid, to be honest. You could put that money, especially the ever-changing environment now with you putting money towards other stuff. It makes sense. What I am striving to do is, I do want to buy more investment properties. So that's kind of a goal. So if you buy too many luxury goods, that doesn't make sense because you could have bought
There was something that makes you money.
Right.
Yeah.
But for example, if you hit a certain dollar value, which then it covers everything else, then it makes sense.
There's some excess to spend. Yeah, that's cool.
But I do like, right now we have a couple of closings coming up too. So we kind of pull back on the investment side just a little bit because it's going to be, I want to manage them first. Yeah. We have a couple of closings coming up that we bought pre-construction. They're all closing all at once. So it's like the financial burden, and we're not sure how long it's going to take to rent out. And so, we'll see what happens. But yeah, I think if in order for you to enjoy anything of luxury, whether it's something small, it could be like a little pin, like something small, which is personal to you, but it might cost you a little more money than you want to spend. I think you need to have goals that don't just go and buy it just to buy it.
Yeah.
Right. Because if you just go on buy it and board it doesn't mean anything to you. But have it set for a certain time that make sure you still want it. Right. And that it does also make sense, because maybe in the 6 months it takes it, maybe you don't want that, maybe you want to change. Right. So there are certain rules we have with that.
Okay. For those young adults right now who are getting into financial independence, they're leaving school, they're just getting out into the world. What are some things you would tell them to do to frame their financial independence the right way? Like, okay, learn this, do this, and this the way you like take on opportunities.
That's hard to say because everyone has a different path.
Different path.
But the first thing I would say is like, always invest in yourself first, right? If you can save money even with your living accommodations, and especially when you're starting to figure that out, whether it's living with your parents or share a room, don't get expensive rental properties that ruins your cash flow, because that'll affect you. It'll affect your business. It'll affect everything else. Cut out relationships that don't progress you, whether that's with your boys, your girls, your partner. If somebody's negative, whether they're not with you in the journey now, walk away. I don't care if you've known them since you're 2 years old. That could be family members too. So those are very important. So accommodations, make sure you're putting the money to where you need it to, and then figure out what your passion is of too. And then take as many courses online, whether it's like going to person. Like I learned stuff in a real estate seminar at the convention center. There's like all these speakers stuff too, which I still use to this day. Pick the brains of the people that have been something, might not be the same industry, but pick the brains of the people that have done it before and then try to mimic that. And that's kind of the step I would do. And then sit down and try to formulate a plan. Do a business plan. You may never use the business plan, but what a business plan, you don't need to submit it to somebody for funding. But what it does is it makes you think about your business. What's my competitive advantage? Like if somebody else is doing it, so why am I better than somebody else? How am I going to fund this? Right? How am I going to market this? Because those are the big ones too. So I don't care if you bought even a rental property. So you buy a rental property. Well, where are you getting the funds from? Okay, so I have to ask so-and-so to borrow. Okay, so if my business plan, so, and am I asking you for money? Are you going to be a partner or are you just going to be a silent partner? So this is what a business plan helps you do. Okay, well, if this situation, what's my buyout? Okay. Next thing is what's my cash flow? Do I have to put money into the property or am I making money on the property? And then do a pro forma too. Like also pro forma is like what's the next 5 years? What is each year going to look like based on these expenses and income? If things don't make sense, and sometimes at the end of the day, financially on paper, things don't make sense, but you can make them work. Trust your gut and go for it. But those are the steps I would take. Like conceptualize on it, take your heart out of it, and just see if it actually makes sense. Right? So with real estate, it's fairly easy because it's been done over and over and over, and there's books on it, and there's written on it. How do you get and that's why it's easy. So you can borrow money to get your 20. If you're buying investment property, you need 20% down, right? Where are you getting the 20% down? If you're using a primary residence, your first time purchase, you can put under 20%, but if it's your second property, you have to put 20% down here in Ontario. Okay, I'm putting 20% down. Where am I getting the 20%? Do I have it in savings? Do I have to borrow it? What am I buying? Where am I buying? Okay, the cash flow is like, so in the next 5 years, I can see the property going to here. And remember, real estate over the long term will earn you money. It's when you're trying to flip it too quickly where you might get in trouble. Okay, once it's built equity, what's equity? It's what somebody would purchase it from what you owe. Okay. And how much of that can I access? Well, why is that important? Well, from that, I can pull that money and buy another property because owning 2 properties earns you more money than owning just one cash cow. And then you can repeat that. And that's what I learned how to do that. But you got to know the numbers, because to borrow the 20,000, the 20%, it's going to cost you, 50%. It's not worth it. Right. So that's why it makes you sit down and think. So by opening up your eyes and saying like, well, where can I borrow the money from? That is, you have to factor that into your business plan. Okay. Maybe you can borrow money at 50% and you can pay it down in like 5 months. Okay. That might actually help you, believe it or not, because then I'm like, I can get rid of the partner as long as you know that's part of the plan. I'm not saying shy away from anything if it scares you. Anything that scares you probably should excite you.
Exactly.
But those are the steps I would say. Like, first of all, know what you want to do. Try to save money wherever you can. Follow the people that have done this before you. How can you make it better? And sit down and write out a business plan and see what makes number. Run some pro formas, and then you can act on it.
Wow. Well said. You have your children set up for success with everything.
Well, no. They will have to do it themselves.
That's what I was going to ask you, right? Because you were saying they got the properties, they got RSPs, they got all these certain things that you didn't have.
As a start. I am not giving them, and I would tell this to everybody else, even Bill Gates, which I don't like the man, won't give any money to his kids. And I think that is very important because anything given to you, you will not appreciate and you will flounder it, and it'll just run through your fingers. If you earn it, you get a head start. So my dad gave me some money to buy my first rental property he talked about too. And because of that, I was able to flourish and learn on my own. But he basically said, here's the money. It's all yours. I did my step. The rest is all you.
I did my job as a dad.
Did my job. Yeah. You can ask me for advice. My question, which I didn't, I didn't really agree with him a lot of stuff, but my kids will be the same way. So I'll help them start as long as it is something that which makes financial sense. Now, if they come to me and say, Dad, I want to buy a red Corvette. It only costs you $500,000. I'm like, and all you have to give me is, like a down payment. I'm like, there's no chance I'm doing that.
Yeah.
Look at the assets, not an asset.
So like, how would you advise those parents out there that are raising young children and they want to get them to be financially literate because they know the public school system is not going to help them, or even university, they're not going to touch unless they actively seek.
Have them start their own business.
From what age?
Whenever they can. Lemonade stand. Walk them through the financials. Okay, how many lemons does it take to crush this? How many days do you have to work? What you don't want them to do to be financially independent is get a job and just work with somebody, because then you get used to just somebody just paying you. You're not really thinking, you're just doing tasks. So whether it's a paper route or whether it's a lemonade stand or whether it's a small business, they can find a niche, or like their friends might need something. Maybe for all you know, is maybe they're going to, Gary Vee does this all the time. He goes to garage sales, picks up something, cleans them up and sells them, puts money. There's also avenues now that you can sell things on Amazon and not even have to do anything. But the best thing is, and if you're a parent and don't know how to be financially literate, how to start it, like work with your child and help them build a business together. Just even something small. I think that will teach somebody.
Gets the gears rolling.
Exactly. They'll get the gears rolling. And then saying like, and then you can start talking bigger picture stuff. It was like, well, write-offs and for accountants and tax purposes and all that stuff too, but getting their mentality of not just going and punching in a clock and saying too, it's like, no, because that is kind of a detriment to, like, I'm saying I want my kids to have jobs. Don't get me wrong. Like my kids, I don't know if my kids are going to be entrepreneurs.
You don't see that in them.
No, not everybody's going to be an entrepreneur. But when they're ready for it, I'll start them on that too. Like, I'm not telling you to take your 6-year-old and all of a sudden start doing but there are certain kids you just see like they get it.
They get it. Yeah. They've got that X factor in
right.
It. Yeah.
Another financial literacy I would say is like, if you wanted to have them earn some of the money they do around the house, it's just like saying, we used to do an allowance stuff too. And it's like, okay, we're going to give you pay, but it's like, like if you earn it, you got to run like your business. You earn this, certain tasks, you get paid for the tasks. So it's not like an employee where it's not just task driven, but if you do this, it's like owning your own business. Okay. What do you want to do to earn money? How much is it worth?
Mm-hmm.
What's your time and effort? So it's kind of like running a small business in the house.
Yeah.
And having certain tasks. If you have certain tasks, you're not an employee where you're guaranteed to get paid if you just show up.
You gotta work for
you
that.
You got to work for it.
Yeah.
And then you set up an account for them, and then you're like, which you can monitor. And every time they go to the mall and they say, I want to buy this, I'm like, okay, well, this is how much money you have in your account. Do you really want it? Or do you want to take this money and put it in investment? My kids right now are just blowing through their money. I'm like, it's a learning process. Go broke. Fine. I'm saying, do you want to put this something else? They're like, no. We're like, do you want to learn about it? They don't.
Mm-hmm.
So it's funny. I was like, what happens if I can make this money grow?
Mm-hmm.
And again, even my kids were just, coming for Natalie and I both run businesses, successful businesses, and we're like, they don't want to learn that yet. So
they're not ready,
but they still have their own money.
Yeah. What books would you share with people who are listening to get them thinking this way of seeing opportunities and making money and understanding investing? Stuff that you've read that you think, hey, if you really read this more than once, you can really start.
I still like all of the Rich Dad Poor Dad stuff is like, I like his stuff.
You like his stuff.
Yeah. It's been a while since I've read some of these books. So it's like now we're on more real estate stuff and I'm like working on
more advanced stuff.
It's more advanced, different stuff. So, but yeah, like The Habits of a Millionaire was a good one too, because that opened up my eyes. And even the Think and Grow Rich. Think and Grow Rich was always a classic, although I know some people have read it, but you've read it a number of times.
Yeah, like 50 times around there. Yeah.
See, I found it boring, but I read it over and over again.
I always go like chapter to chapter. Like I won't read it like front to back, but I'll go to one chapter. Maybe it's like the faith chapter or desire. And what I found is like every single time I read it, I see things differently.
Like the Bible.
Like the Bible.
There you go. Yeah.
You just saturate your mind with the same thing. And when it gets in your subconscious mind, and he actually talks about the subconscious mind in the Think and Grow Rich, you start to really grasp the content at a deeper level, right? If you just read it once, you'd be like, oh, nice read. But if you really have the internal...
I need to read it again is what you're saying.
I mean, you're doing well.
It's been like 20 years.
20 years?
Yeah.
I have the actual classic text. Nice. My ex got it from me back in the day because she knew how much of a fan I was. And she got me like, it looks like a Bible. Like it has like, it's like thick leather, has like the gold ring.
That's amazing.
It's insane. And even a lot of Napoleon Hill's books, even Laws of Success, Outwitting the Devil, all masterful books that will really help you get your mindset up.
There's a couple of practical books I read, which I remember the names of them. One was like starting a corporation, why you should start a corporation. And it was just like a how to do it. And it's like, that allowed me, because it was funny when Natalie started her corporation, she didn't know certain things. I asked her, I'm like, how do you not know this? Like, she goes, how do you know this stuff? Because I'm like, for example, minutes of every time we have a meeting, we have to do minutes. I'm like, well, I read a book about incorporating 15 years ago and doing all this kind of stuff. So it was like, I always had in my mentality just to know if I wanted to know a corporation. So read a book on that. And there's this other book, How to Retire by 35, I think it was. And that taught me a lot about dividend stocks. This guy was a Canadian guy, still does. He goes, he only buys stocks that have high dividends. And he goes, great. He goes, I'm not living a lavish lifestyle. He goes, I'm not going around buying, Louis and Porsches and $5 million homes and all that kind of stuff too. He goes, but I never work. He goes, I make cash, dividends. He made at the point, I think he was making $60,000 a year just because of dividends.
Just because divs.
So you can do. So what that does is opens up your mind to do everything else. So if you are financially set that you don't have to worry about your meals or your food and stuff too, now you can run a business. You can do whatever you want. And if the business fails, you learn from it and we'll do another business because you don't have to worry about your paycheck, your business running, allowing you to live.
DC, yeah, and that's a sweet spot too.
That's a sweet spot.
That is where I dream about being on. It's just like everything because look at it. Once you're living, you're eating, you can move around, you can actually think and be creative. Okay, now I know.
Yeah, before we moved, I was close to that. I would have been mortgage free before we moved. I would have been on, clearly not have to worry of it. And then my wife wanted to move.
Yeah.
Added to my mortgage. And now we're getting hammered out right now, but we're not talking about that.
Yes.
I love my house, but it's like.
It's a nice crib.
Yeah.
It's a sick crib.
But yeah, it is something financial. The reason I'm saying, because that was one of the properties, so I bought it. I had it for 10 years. We were like, at that point, I didn't want to pay off the mortgage. I was still borrowing money, but I was like, everything was my rental properties were covering
everything,
all my expense. They're covering the rental properties, they're covering my expense for the home. Like my mortgage was low enough, and it was like it was covering everything. It was a sweet spot to be in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the funny thing is like we just had this conversation, and you gave the tools and how to think and how to do things. And the sad part is, people are like, oh, cool.
Yeah, they won't use them. Yeah,
they won't use it, And that's like that's the thing. It has to come from you wanting to be better, you wanting to want more. And that's not for everybody.
Yeah. Now, listen, some people enjoy, like, some people like to be an employee. And that's what I said. Like I could say to my kids, they both came and said they were going to be employees. They have good jobs. Yeah, that's
cool.
That's fine. Do you. Do you. But we grew up in an entrepreneurial household, right? So like I grew up in an entrepreneurial household. So to me, it didn't make sense. Even though when I was working as an employee at I told you at Hydro, I don't know if I told you the story, but after we bought our house, which like now my dad had come to, and he's like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
I was like, "What do you mean? What am I doing?" And remember, I had this conversation. He goes,
"Yeah,
I didn't raise you to be an employee." And I was like, "So, but you also at the time, I'm like, but you also didn't teach me how to be an entrepreneur." Yeah. So it was kind of learning. It was one of those catch-22s. I'm like, "What do you mean, Dad?" I was like, but anyway, I think he thought through osmosis because he saw what they did and what he's earned in all those times. So it just kind of made sense. But I also saw all the struggles he went through as a hairdresser and stuff too. I also want to do that either by owning your own business and the hard labor. So you could absolutely do well for yourself with investments and business and things like that, but you can also run yourself ragged if you make some bad decisions. So it's guidance and knowledge never hurts anybody. But I also say too, if your gut and your desire is to be there, you can make it work.
Absolutely. Well, DC fam, that has been episode 40. Hope you got a lot of gems out of this.
40 in, eh?
Yeah, 40 in, man.
Dang.
We're coming close to our podversary in November, which will be pretty sweet. But yes, if you want to learn more, all these clips will be in David's Instagram. You can check those out, share those with people you think who can benefit from this kind of knowledge. And lastly, it starts with you. If you want to get better, if you want to learn, it first starts with your desire to want more. And all the tools are out there. They're not going to give it to you. You have to go seek it. And once you seek it, it'll find you and you can actually take action of it. Any parting words, David?
No, I think this talk was great. I think that as much as you think you can learn from school, there's a lot of tools online that you don't have to spend a lot of money learning about how to make money.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the fallacy is like there is a ton of information out there. You're just going to have to go out and grab it and take your time, absorb it, and then act on it.
Absolutely. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like, share this video, and also subscribe on Apple Podcasts and leave a review. And also on Spotify Podcasts, hit that rating button and get us to the top of the charts. We'll see you next week.
Ciao.
Peace out.